call to order the regular school board meeting for January 23rd, 2018. Roll call, please.
Director Azer?
Here.
Director Shaw?
Here.
Chair Goggins?
Here.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Treasurer Anderson?
Here.
And Clerk Boguszewski is here. Thank you, Madam
Thank you very
Chair.
much. Superintendent Spicoli, do we have any agenda adjustments this evening?
Yes, I'd like to add a study session update or summary to the agenda.
And that would become after action items?
Sounds good.
Okay. Announcements. We have the Paraprofessional Recognition Week this week, and there's a State of Minnesota proclamation. Whereas Minnesota is home to more than 28,000 paraprofessionals who provide services in multiple settings within schools, including support for instruction, for student activities, and for individual students, as well as numerous other tasks that contribute to educational success. And whereas the support and services provided by paraprofessionals are integral to student achievement, resulting in even better, more effective Minnesota schools. And whereas the state of Minnesota and the Minnesota Department of Education are committed to excellence in education and recognize the important role that paraprofessionals play in ensuring educational success. And whereas the Department of Education will celebrate the contributions of paraprofessionals during Paraprofessional Recognition Week, which runs January 22nd through January 26, 2018. Now therefore, I, Mark Dayton, Governor of Minnesota, do hereby proclaim the week of January 22nd to January 26, 2008 as Paraprofessional Recognition Week. We wanted to add that in our district, we are extremely fortunate to have many highly qualified paraprofessionals that do a lot of really important work for our students, and we are very grateful for them and the contribution they make to our school system. So just adding to the proclamation of Governor Dayton, because certainly in our district this is true. Are there any other announcements or comments? Is there any community input this evening? There's none this evening, so we'll move to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of passing the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Excellent. Karen, would you care to
Sure.
share the gifts?
I'd love to. Thank you to our generous community. From Touch National School Studios, a gift of funds for student enrichment activities to Edgerton Elementary School. To Little Canada Elementary School from Linda Bendix, a flute and a saxophone for student use. For Parkview Center School, Your Cause Corporate Giving Programs has donated funds for principal's discretion. Also for Parkview Center School from Walmart, a gift of funds for the eSTEM classroom stools. To Fairview Alternative High School from Jamie Hedden, a gift of funds for the FOS negative lunch accounts. Oh, that's a nice one. From Randy Meyer and Diane Soderberg Meyer to Roseville Area High School, a gift of funds for the Roz Food Shelf. To Roseville Area High School from the Roseville Boys Backcourt Club, a gift of funds for an additional coach. From Virginia Gook, a gift of funds for band instruments, and quite a large gift of funds for band instruments. From an anonymous donor, gift of funds for a Roz Food Shelf. And then the rest are to the Roseville area schools. From Jenny Hopper, a gift of funds for the elementary band orchestra program. From Premier Bank, a gift of funds for the Roseville area senior program. From St. Michael's Lutheran Church, a gift of funds for Meals on Wheels. And from St. John's Church of Little Canada, a gift of funds for Meals on Wheels. Thank you to our generous community.
Thank you. We are always so fortunate with the support we get from our community. We deeply appreciate it. So that moves us on to reports and non-action items. The first report we have this evening is a program participation report. And we have Dr. Locke, Dr. Mobley, Christina Robertson, and Jake Bondelindia to present that information.
Thank you. And Christina Robertson is ill tonight, so she will not be here. But it will be myself, Jake Bondelindia, Dr. Mobley, and Dr. Lake as well presenting. And we are presenting the program participation report tonight. This is a discussion on who is participating in some of our key identified programs. And there is multiple sections that we'll walk you through tonight. Dr. Mobley will walk you through our special education program. I'll be walking you through gifted and talented. Dr. Lake will be walking us through the athletics and activities. I will be walking us through the advanced options at the middle level, and Dr. Lake will be filling in for Christina for the English learner programs. I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Mobley.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to get us started, and just to ground us, this really looks at overrepresentation for scholars who are referred to special education. And this usually happens through the SAT team process at buildings, and it may include our RT chairs as well. And so over a 4-year period, we have seen an increase in our special education referrals for our Black students. This remains an area that we're continuing to work on. And for the last year, we also saw an increase for American Indian, Hispanic, and Black scholars. And if you look at the next slide, it'll show a little bit in detail what this really means. And so if you look to the very right, anything over 1.0 is what we focus on. And as you can see, for Black scholars, we're 1.46. For American Indian, 1.7. And for Hispanic, 1.5. Now, I want to point out, if you look for all scholars of color, it's 1.03. And that's why we disaggregate the data by race. Because if we were to look at just that, it would mask some of the disparities that we see. So we're continuing to focus on our Black scholars for referrals. Conversely, if you go to the next slide, when we look at scholars who actually receive special education services, the only overrepresentation that we see this year is for our Hispanic scholars. So there's been some work Karen Filla did last year, and then we're continuing to do it through the SAT process and RRT. It is working, and we're going to continue to do that. And so the rest of the report describes some of those things that we'll continue to do. And then, in addition to that, figure out why our Hispanic scholars are showing up at disparities.
Question? Is it okay to ask questions as we go through, or what would you prefer?
That's right.
So, is it your sense that the overrepresentation of specifically the Black kids is true overrepresentation versus something like our African American families or parents of African American students coming to Roseville because they feel underserved in other districts, and so we have a cohort of kids who are African American who actually have a need? Just an honest question.
The over-referral is for referrals to special ed.
Okay.
The only over-representation for scholars actually receiving services for Hispanic scholars.
Okay.
So one could surmise that even though they're referred more, right, there's not an over-representation for the scholars actually served.
Got it. So the correction.
Not this year,
If there
or
is one
last
that needs to happen, then it's really a referral judgment itself. Okay. Thank you.
It seems to me that almost as concerning would be the underrepresentation of a group, that they are not, for our Asian Pacific Islanders, that they're not being seen as students that need services when perhaps they really do need services. And that is, although it's 1.19 for our Hispanic students overrepresented, and I'm not saying one's better than the other, 0.57 is really off. Correct?
So, great question, great comment. This report, even though it's titled underrepresentation, we are really focused on overrepresentation.
Okay.
And the reason we're doing that is because it is easier to say, what are things we're doing to make sure our scholars aren't overrepresented, versus actively seek out, let's go find some more students to make sure they qualify for special education. And so we do this by making sure that in our SAT team process, it goes back to the PLC process, that we're identifying scholars who are struggling, right, and that we have them. And so, so yes, we do look at that, but we focus on the overrepresentation because of that. And what we don't want to do is create a system where we look for scholars that are not disabled and then actively recruit them for special education.
I think,
And that's a historic national trend as well.
So I wonder if, just as we looked and just aggregated students of color by race, if also by disability here, because I suspect oftentimes some of the concern with overrepresentation, I think relates more specifically to EBD, sort of behavioral types of special ed services. So in that case, an underrepresentation may not be as big of a concern. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
And nationally, scholars who are Asian Pacific Islander qualify for categories such as speech language, right? And so, and Hispanic as well. And so looking at that trend, and that's a great point. How do we continue to go deeper with this information to the building level? One thing I forgot to add is, in order to make sure that we are looking at all scholars, this year something that we have done is made sure that all referrals, at least, and all scholars receiving special ed services are given to each building, disaggregated by building, by race. So that starts the conversation as well.
So I understand what you're saying, but I do agree with Director Racer. Let's just keep it in mind, because we don't want to overlook a need if there's something going on within that population.
Absolutely. Students who
course.
need services,
Of
we need to
course.
identify them and get them the services they need. I think many of the articles we see around representation of special ed and the disparities focuses around referrals and participation in behavioral services, EBD.
Well, you know,
So that was the
what leads to
origin of the
mind, and I don't
comments.
know if it's an issue here, I know even in my past experience, Asian, if that includes Hmong and those communities, often there's a reticence on the part of families to seek help. So my worry would be that the underrepresentation could be due to that the dialogue isn't happening or feedback isn't happening perhaps with the families or the parents within the Hmong or other Asian communities who see that as kind of a stigma still. So.
Certainly, it could go across all. And then we also have child find that we're required to make sure we do. And so we have to make sure that even though we're looking at overrepresentation, we're not missing families. So we'll continue to talk about that in our family engagement that will come up in one of the future board meetings.
So our Gifted Talented program is our next slide. So this data is for students who have been formally identified. So we start formally identifying students in 3rd grade, and so this is 3rd through 12th grade. We do have some students who are informally identified in those K through 2 grades, but those are not considered in this data at this point. So again, that proportionate amount is 1.0, and if we look at our students of color are all underrepresented in our Gifted and Talented program, and our white students are about 1.5 times overrepresented. We continue to under-identify Black, Hispanic, and EL students in the program, and we have been in process of a Gifted and Talented program review. We hope to bring that to you soon. We have kind of a pause in our process this year with our Gifted and Talented coordinator being out on medical leave, and so we hope to get that back up in process and get some of those recommendations moving as well. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the representation. Again, we're looking for that 1.0 to be representative of the population to the percent in that program. You can see the white students are much more overrepresented. Our EL students are, there's very low representation in our Gifted and Talented program, as well as our other students of color groups. We do use some of those practices that are looked at to do best practice in terms of universal screening in 3rd and 5th grade, so that's screening all students, not just a select group of students. We have tried to move to that, to the NNAT screener, which is a nonverbal approach to screening for students, and we moved to that about 3 years ago. We have not seen the results that we were hoping to see to identify more students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch, or more linguistically diverse students as well. And so there is other things that we need to be looking at because we are not identifying our students proportionately.
Jake, I'm sorry. So how is the 1 arrived at?
So that is looking at the percent of the population in the schools.
Right.
That would be your denominator.
Right, but then there has to be an assumption on what that percentage should be.
Right, what we're saying is what is the percent of the students in that program compared to the percent of students in our overall 3 through 12th grade?
In overall, okay, so one is overall
Right. Yep.
compared to the pulled out different.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's
Yes.
our
So we're
overall, the
saying-
baseline is total,
Right.
and within your segment, okay.
Right.
If one line is above, another line has to be
Yeah,
below.
yeah,
Good evening, everyone. I invited Mr. Whistler to join me this evening, and I thought it was beautifully ironic that we canceled activities. So we gave him the night off because he works so many evenings. And I also wanted to take time to just publicly recognize his tremendous leadership for the past 5 years in Roseville Schools, but also for the past 30 in his career. He has a pending retirement at the close of this school year, so I just wanted to recognize him. This report identifies participation in grades 7 through 12. We offer 4 categories: academics, academic groups, athletics, clubs, and fine arts. And for the most part, we pair academic groups and clubs. They're hard to pull apart. So when we go further in the presentation, you'll see that as a collective.
And all musical groups are under
Fine arts, yes.
Okay.
Yep, and we'll talk about that as well.
All right.
We're really proud of our participation rate. Our demographics, students of color participate at a rate of 45% in grades 7 through 12. The student demographics 7 through 12 is 53%. Participation continues an upward trend we believe, due to the diversity of participation opportunities and outreach efforts on the part of our staff. And more information needs to be gathered regarding our EL recruitment and barriers, as you'll see when we move to the next few slides. We just wanted to give you a sampling of some of the activities we offer in grades 7 through 12, and that is across schools, so not every activity is offered in every school. So one category is athletics, and I'd highlight we also offer 3 levels of adapted athletics with our special education students: adapted softball, floor hockey, and soccer.
Jenny, is the size of the type reflective
No.
of anything?
I asked the same thing, because I said, why is hockey bigger?
Hockey's too big, too big, it's too big.
Right? That's what everyone's going to
It's safe to say
say.
a hockey mic.
I want to, let's make swimming and
Nordic.
diving really big.
Nordic should be
This is
much
a
Nordic should be
random
much bigger.
sample.
This is like the #1 area in the country for Nordic, by the way.
Yes. And this is quite the slide, too, activities and clubs. I think I can define what each of these clubs are. If not, I could give it my best guess. But we pull them apart a little bit, those who have connections to the curricular areas. But I'm a big believer that all activities help promote academic success. So we, again, truly believe we have something for everyone in our grades 7 through 12.
So is hack like hacking for computers? or-
Yes,
Okay.
computer coding club.
All right.
They have to be a little edgy. Yes. And then the final slide is the fine arts. So that's all of our music groups, theater, speech, debate for the most part. And again, very proud of our strong fine arts program. And so on this slide, if I could do it over, I would again group academic clubs and with our groups together, so then you can see the even split. And this is a duplicated count. So students are participating in equal divisions in athletics, fine arts, and academic clubs and groups. So again, something to be very proud of. And then this is our strong slide around the over and under representation of activities in athletics. And you note we're almost there in terms of representation. Our white students are overrepresented 1.17. So we'll continue to strive for equal representation. We really have more to look at around the EL. You see that's significantly lower. And some of that is just simply around coding. So that's not an excuse, but when a club becomes formal, they're coded into our student database Synergy. And oftentimes our EL students regularly stay after school with teachers in a support group, activities, take trips, but it's not coded in a specific club. So I think that's a little bit of the underrepresentation, but we still need work to do. Of course, around the barriers, especially around athletics with participation starting so young for students. And then our EL students want to participate beginning in 9th grade, and then they face barriers in that area.
So to me, there's a fundamental difference between athletics and everything else.
Yeah.
What's that like? Is athletic compared to like fine arts kind of the same shapes of the curves, or?
We didn't pull that data, and that's a great question. I would think due to the barriers, our white students are more significantly overrepresented in the area of fine arts.
Yeah.
And then second would be athletics. And then third would be academic clubs and groups, because we truly try to remove all barriers for clubs and groups. In terms of removing fees, there's no transportation, there's no need to participate since you've been 6 years old. Anyone can join, there's no cutting, things like that.
Like that, just a personal area of interest is fine arts and music and art and all that. You know, if the blend looks good, but if it's because, you know, there's a lot more black or non-white kids in athletics versus fine arts, that's not good either. So
Right.
if there's a way to
Right.
get some
And-
sense of that.
We can look at that, and that continues to be a goal in the area of fine arts. If you were to look at that pie chart, that gives me encouragement that the student participation
Right.
is divided
It's
in
kind of
thirds.
divided.
And in the fine arts, they're so connected to the curricular areas that that's always a goal, whether it be writing curriculum or the choosing of music or productions or et cetera. And it's always licensed staff in that area as well.
Yeah, so how do you split out kids who participate in two or more of these, or all these categories?
So it's a duplicated count. So if students participate, for example, in 7 different activities, they're marked in all 7.
Okay.
So one student may make up for more of the counts.
So Advanced Options is a program that we more formally began. We did some piloting prior to last year, but more formally began in the last year. And this data that you'll see that's coming on the next slide are for students in grades 7 and 8, both at Rams, Roseville Area Middle School, and at Parkview, who participated in at least one advanced option during that school year of last year. We had overall about 51%, so over half of our student population completed at least one advanced option. We do see that white students are overrepresented by about 11 percentage points, whereas our students of color are underrepresented by about 9%. Most of our students were, when they were doing the advanced options, they would complete 1 or 2 per trimester in each course. We do see students that went to 3 or 4, but typically it was that 1 or 2 level and range. But we do have teachers that are encouraging our students to take advanced options, either to try it or to attempt more if they have tried it as well. We do see that EL participation was the lowest compared to our other demographic groups. So for many of our EL students, just doing some of the mainstream work is almost, can be an advanced option for them as well. And that was some feedback from Christina as well that she wanted to include into our report. So next slide shows kind of the different representation, or the different groups. I didn't put it in a longitudinal slide, obviously just in the bar graphs for this year, so that we could see where they land. Again, we wanted at that 1.0 level, but we do see that representation for all students of color pretty close to that 1.0 range where we'd like to see it, less than in the Hispanic and English learners categories, but again, looks better than what we would see in some of our other representation in other AP classes, for example, or in some of our gifted and talented programs.
So there could be a correlation, but maybe not really, right? Because advanced options is really up to the student deciding that they want to participate, whereas gifted and talented is really an external identification by someone else. So here, underrepresentation is attacked by working in different ways to convince the student that he or she or they
Encouraging.
might want to participate.
Yes.
Whereas gifted and talented maybe more the staff, the teacher, the parent, the family, whoever going along with the identification.
And the testing as well. Too.
Okay, got it. Well, even to take the
Part of
test.
that, yeah.
Okay.
Every student will be screened though.
Okay.
So it's not.
Then it pops out.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
And again, I'm sure Christina's sad she couldn't be here because she's so proud of her program. So not as the English learner expert, I'll be stepping in for her, reading with you. approximately 1,200 EL students in grades K through 12 this past year. Of the 1,200 students, 30% are Hispanic and 50% are Asian Pacific Islander. Refugee placement organizations are anticipating a drastic decline in refugee settlement in the United States, and I know we anticipate staffing in that direction too with the decline in our EL enrollment. Last year we enrolled 53 SLIFE students, which I interpret as level 1 students who have interrupted education, and we have 179 students who are identified as EL and special education because they are also under identified or represented. Of those students, 45% are Asian and 41% are Hispanic. And you can go ahead and take a look at the demographic.
Any questions on this one or our presentation overall? This is the end of the formal presentation.
We needed a question slide.
Yeah, we didn't add one this time.
Well, that certainly doesn't inhibit us.
We figured.
I don't know why, I should have probably asked this earlier before the meeting, and I apologize, but in some of these areas, I'm curious about our special ed students. So, are special ed students trying advanced options? Are our special ed students involved in activities? And I don't know if that's something that would be broken down, maybe not so much in the activities piece, but it'd be great to know that all of our students are taking advantage of our great programming.
I agree. We can definitely look into that. I know that they are. Yeah, I think it would be great to add that, even as an after to the presentation, to look and see if there's some areas we could possibly grow and celebrate.
Can I get on my soapbox for 1 second about something? I think it's interesting that as I was thinking about my kids that are in elementary school, that if you were to talk to a 4th or 5th grader or 3rd grader, I think they all kind of think they're gifted and talented. I do. And
I have a 4th grader too.
I think that when, and then they're sort of separated out a little bit. And I think that's sort of made clear when you look at the advanced options is kids don't know that they're not gifted and talented until they're told they're not. And I don't know whether that's here or there. I mean, I think we all know I have my issues with some of our programming sometimes with that, where I think every kid's gifted and talented. So I guess that's just my little soapbox. And I don't know how we change things, but this gifted and talented slide, it's a hard one to look at, isn't it? That's it.
Can I join her on a soapbox?
The end.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioners asking you.
First of all, I would concur with Director Azer on that. I do think all kids are gifted, and I think that is disturbing, the representation we have in that program. I also want to just point out one other thing that came to my mind. Again, this is sort of just correlation and just kind of making, some inferences perhaps on causes. But to Director Azer's point earlier that was affirmed by Director Bogashevsky, when we have students who underrepresentation might be an indication that students aren't getting services they want. And when I see the EL data that we saw here, there may be a correlation there, particularly with Asian Pacific Islanders. There may be a lot of things that work, but sometimes in education, and some of this may be due to limited resources, but it seems like if a student is in one program, they may be less likely to be in another, which isn't necessarily right because it may not meet the student's needs. Maybe that's part of the underrepresentation going on there, and something we should be cognizant of, as you so pointed out.
I have some students that, because I'm an English teacher, as everyone knows, and that English isn't their first language, but I can tell in their writing that if they were writing in their own language, they would blow it out of the water. And that is gifted.
Yeah, I was recently in a level 1 class at Roseville High School about 2 weeks ago, a level 1 EL class, and the writing assignment that the kids did, I told the teacher later, I could not imagine being level 1 in another language and write what they wrote. It was very impressive.
I was just going to add on to what Director Azer was saying, but I think also part of it is, a lot of folks, when they think gifted and talented, think of the kind of high-bound traditional test-taking kind of gifted, or maybe writing. But even ESSA now, right, is really pushing for a broadening of the definition include gifted at music, gifted at art, gifted in dance, gifted in voice, gifted in leadership, gifted in social intelligence. So I think as we work towards perhaps broadening that definition and incorporating some of that, we will discover the giftedness and the talents that maybe not aren't related strictly to I can take a test very well, but the other things that really help kids rise and find their unique, preeminent role in the world as they go out. So I think that's really important to do that and build on the ESSA emphasis in broadening that here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of our, what we do with that informal identification. Those earlier grades, they do the HOPE scale. And that's actually multiple areas where a student could be seen as quote-unquote gifted, however you would look at it. So it's leadership skills, it's some of those social emotional pieces that, the kind of that EQ, the emotional quotient that people talk about as well. So it's looking at that more of that whole child, not just the academic testing part of it as well too. But then again, it's hard to run a whole program based on all of those different and offer those different areas for talents with limited resources, and also a requirement from the state to say you have to have a process to identify students who are.
Yeah, maybe I'll say this too, and I hope it doesn't get me off the soapbox. But at the same time, everything we just said I think is totally true. Historically, there's also been sometimes the attitude, oh, gifted and talented kids, they can take care of themselves. We don't, they're okay, they're fine, we don't need to help them. Where, I think it doesn't recognize that if there is a particular talent in one area, they could just be normal, happy kids in other areas, and, there's a mismatch of their talent and their overall development that requires some care and some caution. And I think that was reflected even at the MSBA meeting that we, when there were votes about certain resolutions. There was one about gifted and talented, and it did pass. But I think it passed with the lowest margin of any of the votes, and it's reflected again by this kind of presumption on the part of many people of, we don't have to worry about the gifted kids. And I don't think that's true. So everything we said earlier is true, but I think it's true also that we can't ignore or just assume that a gifted or talented child in a particular area can just take care of him or herself and doesn't need support and help. So
I think that's something that we make sure that we're trying to appropriately challenge all students.
I have a question about our process a little bit. We have these wonderful reports that we're looking at it. Where do we integrate the concepts or ideas you're taking forward to address the issues that you bring to our attention? Can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that comes through our strategic planning process and our action plans. These are the things that feed into all of those ideas that we have and are currently working on as well. So
I can speak to something specific. I mentioned it a little. I get excited when we're talking about this piece. So part of it is I don't believe in admiration of data. I believe in looking at data and actually doing something with it. And so the one-pagers that I mentioned are new this year. So every principal has their special education data broken out, down to the referrals. And it's a 3-year trend, so they can see how many referrals did I have last year, how many referrals do I have even this track. And so that is a way to start the conversation, right? And look deeper behind the referrals. So I'm excited about that. It's been well received. And the second thing is, so a lot of the referrals start at PLC and then move to SAT teams. And so there's some work being done right now to make sure that if there's a new SAT team, that they all receive the same training. So I've been working with 3 principals and 2 other individuals to bring everybody together on SAT teams to look at, what are our common practices? How are we collecting data? What is it saying? What do we need to do? What are our wonderings as well?
We define SAT team again,
Yes,
please.
thank you. Sorry, I'm a special ed acronym, right? Sorry about that. Student assistance teams. So the way it works is if our PLCs, professional learning communities, if you have scholars who are struggling in different areas, you can bring scholars to a student assistance team. And so that team is made of multidisciplinary individuals where they look, collect data, and develop a plan for each scholar.
So that integrates very well with the multi-tiered system of support
Yes.
report we had
Yes.
at our previous meetings.
Exactly. That's all part
exactly
of
what
it.
it is.
So there's a direct correlation between all 3 of those.
Actually, picking up where Kitty's left off there, the advanced option, we've had this 2 years now. believe.
This
We're
is
in
our
the
second year.
It's our second year.
Yes.
So we're looking, this is the
Just
data
the-
from
Last year, the full year.
the full year
The full year's
last year. So there isn't any sense of, that's why you don't have a time.
Yes, that's why I just did the bar graph rather than the line. Yes.
So has there been any adjustment in that as the program has gotten going?
We have been talking through, as we go along, we have an administrative advanced options team that meets on a monthly basis, so it's the principals, myself, and Dr. Lake, along with Chris and Miles, our coordinators, and we look over the data, we talk about the data, and principals bring that back to their teachers at the site and have conversations around that too, to see, again, kind of more on a monthly basis or after, especially after the first trimester, we could collect that data and say, where do we need to encourage more students? Where do we need to make sure that we're pushing, whether it's at a department level, because we have it in science, as well as English, and to say, are there more happening in English or more in science? Do we see more offered overall in a particular teacher's class or versus another one? And talking through those data points at the teacher level as well. So principals are having those conversations. So yes, so we are checking in.
Okay, so
at
I
different points.
mean, have the conversations resulted in any changes? Have there been any adjustments as a result? I mean, are things?
Yes.
Have you identified? So
Yes,
can you give an
yes.
example of?
So, for example, we looked at our first trimester data, and we're encouraging. So we looked at it by grades as well. So
Okay.
students who are receiving C's or below, we are asking teachers to encourage those students to try at least one AO this trimester. For our students who are above that level, we're encouraging to go deeper and to do maybe if they have one or two, to try a third one. As we see more students pushing into advanced options, we see their grades increasing as well. So it's looking at that. That's a specific example that we looked at from the first trial. To keep continuing to have kids be involved, and we also look at it we disaggregate it by race as well, and we're seeing about the same trends in that way too.
So it's interesting that you say that the grades are improving as they move into more advanced options. Is that simply because they're engaging more? Because the idea is the advanced option is going to be more challenging, and the extent to which the grade measures the aptitude of the student, it seems like the grades should, A's should go in the direction of B's as they move into advanced options. So are advanced options sort of graded in a weighted way?
No.
Or is it really just that they get excited and they do better?
That's a really good question that I haven't had a conversation with students, so we are doing some focus groups as well with students who are participating in AO and some students who are not participating in AO, and some students who have been identified as gifted and some students who have not been identified as gifted. So trying to find out from the student level, like, what's more engaging for you, what's less engaging for you. But what we're seeing is students who are having A's and B's are more likely to try AO. And so what we're hoping to see is to encourage some of those students who are maybe not getting A's and B's to try some of those things, to make sure that they're having those same opportunities or encouraged to have those same opportunities as well. So I can't disaggregate that for you right now or to know exactly.
Well, I'm wondering also
But I
whether
would
the
tell you-
causation, the causation is not going A's to B's is to AO, or AO is to A to B's. Which, I mean,
I can't say that there is a
yeah,
cause,
okay.
but correlation maybe more. But
Yeah.
Again, it's that conversation with the
Okay,
student
okay.
and that teacher. So
I appreciate your answer.
yeah.
While we're still maybe on advanced options, I know advanced options in science and English. Has there been talk about expanding to a few other subjects, social studies or other areas? Just
Social studies is our next one to come.
next one? Okay.
Yes, and so we are planning on rolling that out. We don't have a date yet or a time to do that yet, but we're looking at, we're looking at our data to say what are the effective practices that have been happening in our English program and our science program, so that we could continue to make sure we can offer that to our social studies as they move into that. So hopefully we will have a phase 1 next fall, but again, we're phasing that in. So, because I would say, and here's why. We really felt like we were able to support and do a really good job with our English and science teachers to provide them with the resources they needed. And the feedback that we got from our teachers was that they really felt supported in doing this work. So we want to make sure that we have that same support that we can give to our social studies teachers so that they can feel engaged in the process and make sure that we are able to do that. So that's one of the pieces that we want to make sure that we have. And we want to make sure that when we're looking at our data, that that our data is reflective of our population, because we don't want to put in place another program that wouldn't be representative. Yeah.
This isn't probably, and I'll make it really brief because it's not really totally tied to this presentation. But going to advanced options, I am curious what the end game is going to be, because they don't have advanced options in 9th grade. It's tracked in. And so what I wouldn't want is for these students to get to that point and then it's just another barrier or another way that maybe they don't go the AP route when they could have. Because that's the goal, right? That's the end game, if I remember correctly, is that we want more students to be AP ready if they want to take AP courses. So it will be interesting to see if there's an increase in AP, students taking AP in, 11th grade in Roseville, that they take AP English and Science?
They can actually take a 9th grade AP
All grades.
environmental science
Environmental
class.
science.
Yeah.
So then in English, I don't think they usually happen until 11th or 12th grade. It would be interesting to see if they,
Pre-AP, we could measure that pre-AP entry point.
Which is in 9th grade. Yeah.
which is it's essentially like an accelerated. I mean, it's because it doesn't count. I mean,
Mhm.
it's pre-AP, but it's not. They're not going to get any AP credit for it. So the idea that they're not tracked in middle school and then they go to high school and they're tracked again is something we might want to consider.
And I would say that it's not just AP either.
Yeah.
And I totally get, so it's, when we look at our courses, what we've tried to look at is more broadly the college and career, like the credit-bearing courses. So not just those AP ones, but some of the CIS and
I think it goes back to, though,
enrollment.
with thinking about our students, and I'm going to make an analogy that women don't run for office unless they're asked to run for office because they're not sure that they can do it. Men do because they assume they can do it. They assume they're going to win. And I think that sometimes we have some situations with maybe some of our students that are EL or that are students of color. They may not think they can do it unless somebody says, you can do it, I want you to do it. And I think that there's some of that we can make that analogy here with advanced options, with a lot of the things that we're looking at, our gifted and talented data. That we have to encourage students to do it. We have to tell them that we believe that they can do it. And I would think that, when we track them again, we're saying some of you can and some of you can't. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it goes to what you said earlier too. I think you made a comment along the lines of kids think they're gifted until they're told they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. One of my biggest hopes, whether it's for AP or advanced options, is that students, they get the engagement, they get the enthusiasm, and they're also building confidence as they go along that helps them do better in life. And you raise a good point, because are they told this? And then we'll see, like Dr. Lake says, we can track, our pre-AP and see do we have more enrollment in that, but ultimately, is that the right system? Or do they get there and now they're told they're not? And we need to look at that. We're going to have a conversation, a study session in the spring, because you had brought this up before, and I'm certainly, philosophically, I'm in alignment with you.
I know, and I'm afraid that I'm going to
but
get phone
you
calls
and I-
late at night from the English teachers, like, what are you doing? But I think it,
But
but
you and I at this table won't immediately change something.
absolutely not. But I have to
We
say
need
it
go through the
every other
process.
day. I have to say it every other meeting, and this is a perfect opportunity for me too, because it aligns with this, and I think it's important.
And I appreciate your passion. I share that.
I'm just going to add a piece of information. I had the opportunity to present at MSBA with Amy Dowling and Jennifer George on this topic around AP. And one of the things that I learned from Amy that I hadn't heard at the board table, so I'll share it here, is that we've seen a threefold increase in the EL students taking advanced placement classes. And particularly, she's seen a lot of success in her English classes. So it was
That's
very
great.
encouraging to hear.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much for your update and the information. The next item we have on our reports and non-action items is policy 576, use of peace officers and crisis teams to remove students with IEPs from school grounds. This is a first reading, and Dr. Alicia will be presenting this as well.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Mobley once again. And so it is my pleasure to do my first reading of my first policy while here at Roseville. Policy 576. And just for context, the policy was last adopted in 2004. So as part of the regular review of policies, we are doing this now. And so what you will see is some MSBA recommended language. And it is not all of it, it's some of it. And it includes ensuring that we have some information on restrictive procedures in the event that scholars need to be removed, and making sure that piece is in there as well. Now, this is very brief. The MSBA full the full policy also includes definitions of most of these things, and so what I've done is move that to the regulation versus putting it in the policy. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, so the last paragraph, the first sentence, seems to be sort of written twice. So it talks about a student harming him or herself or others, and then you get to the end and it says a student with an IEP. It seems like if you put that with an IEP after the first mention of student in that sentence, and then not the last words off, it would make sense. That was the only thing I saw. Everything else makes good sense to me.
Any other comments, Mike?
Yeah, so in that same last paragraph, so even with the removal of that, I didn't understand the relation between the first sentence and the second sentence. So it says, if a student is in danger, blah, 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 restrictive procedures may be employed by appropriate school personnel. The next sentence says, restrictive procedures by school personnel are not addressed in this policy. But didn't the first sentence just address it? That's my question. What's the difference between appropriate school personnel and normal school? Like, you see what I'm saying? It seemed to
So is the distinction
contradictory
here with the
between
specific
Right.
procedures, so maybe that could be reworded.
Yeah, I could see a need for rewording to make it clear.
That'd be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I guess I also had a general question kind of in that line, and maybe I'm completely missing something, but with that second sentence, restrictive procedures by school personnel are not addressed by this policy, where are they actually addressed?
So,
Or am I just missing something?
nope, so there is another policy that we will review in the spring, 520. It's a discipline policy, and that's where the specifics of that are addressed.
Oh, so maybe that's it then. It
It's a
means
school
this
discipline.
one is specific to students with an
With
IEP
IEP.
versus
Yeah,
second
that's
is
how
more
I took it.
general.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. That wasn't clear to me. I think if you reword that, then that answers your question.
I think with the rewording, it'll
Yeah, yeah.
answer both of your questions, I can see.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this? Hearing none, that moves us to our policy 808, volunteers. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Karen Shaw will be covering this one.
Good evening. In front of you, you'll find a draft of policy 808, volunteers. And a little background, MSBA policies do not cover anything around volunteers. They do around background checks. So when we review policies, we always look to see what's new in MSBA, if there's any laws that have changed, anything that we need to change. So that then led me to start researching other school districts to see other school districts if they have volunteer policies. Very few other districts do have volunteer policies, The districts that I did look at that did have volunteer policies, it's all around districts that actually have a department where it is staffed with someone who oversees all the volunteer work in the district. I'm bringing that up to you just so that you know, as part of your decisions always, on whether you keep a policy or you don't keep a policy. I'm not necessarily making a recommendation either way, but I wanted you to know that there really isn't, the policy is really self-developed here in the school district. As I looked at it, trying to make our volunteer policy look like and act the same way as the rest of our policies, you'll see that we added a purpose, we realigned things to a general statement, and responsibilities. As I looked at some of the other school district policies, and there were probably only 4 of them that I could find, they did talk about where this policy can be applied to. And so I thought that seemed to make a lot of sense to me, that as we look at it, we're talking about during this regular school day, before or after school, because we do use volunteers before or after school. So that piece made some sense to me to add to it. And I think on the back page of it, somehow another top thing got added. It was just copied into the paper somehow, so I'm sure you noticed that and knew that that was different. So from the base under the general statement of policy, the 1.2 down to the 1.5 were part of our past policy, and then we just added purpose and more of a general statement policy with the responsibilities. So I'm open to any questions on whether this fits what you were hoping to see, or whether this is something that you want to continue to have as a policy.
Just a quick question. This would also cover volunteers who are students themselves. So, for example, a high school student volunteers to man a cash box at a football game, or help oversee littler kids during a report card night or something. So then, would they be subject to, or would we have to reword this to get parental permission on the criminal history consent, or does it cover other students who volunteer? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so really the piece that we have in the school district around volunteers is a very clear piece around background checks. So yes, we probably would need to think about that, or we could address it in some attached procedures, which we do not have to this. But it seems to me the only really attached procedure we have right now would be around background checks.
Right. Or, would we be comfortable with, if we did agree with this overall, to just have in here somewhere that it's non-Roseville area district students, that it exempts them from this?
Or it's adult volunteers.
Yeah, or it's adult volunteers, or, because I don't think we shouldn't need to do, right, so.
The
just to
traffic,
clarify,
the traffic
right.
people.
So, maybe rather do it that way, Karen, is just put something in there that the
Addresses it.
current students, minors are exempted.
Yeah, because you do specifically say multi-generational experiences here.
Right.
So it's about adult.
Yes.
So you're saying that only 4 other districts have this policy about volunteers, correct? Did I get
That I
it
could
right?
find, yes.
So what would happen if we eliminated it? Where is there other places where it says that our volunteers have to have criminal checks?
It is a procedure that we do, and so on our website, we do talk about volunteers, and we do talk about when they need to have a background check. So we would continue, and I believe that would be state law, so we never break state law, so we would continue to do that practice.
So my question is, do we need this policy?
Just personal perspective, to me, by having a policy level on this item, it means that we're really encouraging volunteers, that volunteers are very important to our district. And the fact that we say we have to have a supervision and assignments, I'll assume that's not anywhere else in law, so we would lose that piece. I'm just throwing a different perspective at it. Anybody else have a comment? What's your perspective?
This would be our first reading, so we certainly can bring it back at the next time that we are, next school board meeting, I believe that's on, and for folks to have some reflection. I kind of go back and forth on this a little bit because I feel like a lot of our policies really do follow law and direct our work. This one, if we didn't have it, we would never stop using volunteers. Other departments or other school districts have a lot more protocols because they actually have a real formal program in their school district. That makes more sense to me when you have that formal program. You've spent a lot more time in digging deep, the protocols, etc. And right now, we have developed our volunteers around specific programs in specific buildings.
We have, but I guess this would also cover the reading volunteers and the mentors and all that as part of the partners.
Partners and giving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we addressed a few of those things is when you sign up, it's really, there are pieces you get that are very clear on our expectations.
Okay. Would this also include members of groups that used district facilities, like, say, the Boy Scouts, whereas we're doing...
No, it would not.
Okay.
It would be somebody who either we recruit or somebody who would call the school district and say, I would like to volunteer to do such and such. When those calls come in at our school buildings, it's determined if it's something that they're looking for or we've been out searching for volunteers. So it's very specific.
What do you believe we would lose if we didn't have this policy?
I'm not sure we would lose anything at this particular time. I don't see it changing any of our practices. I still believe we would always welcome volunteers into our building. I also believe that we would also continue to follow some best practices around background checks and making sure that it's very clear to each of our volunteers what it is that we're asking them to do.
I keep thinking about the purpose is to promote and encourage school volunteers, and if somebody didn't want to volunteer, but we have a policy, you know, I mean, I don't know.
And I know we've always kept looking at each policy to determine whether it's one that we want to continue. It's been, I believe, the belief of this board that we don't have policies just to have them. We have them for a reason, and we believe in them.
Either way.
Well, the big ad here, the key ad is the clause on the background of the criminal history consent, the background checks, and we do it anyway.
Yes.
Right? But at the same time, so maybe let me throw a devil's advocate question out here: Are there folks in the community who could interpret, if we remove this policy, that things are lackadaisical and you could have, a serial killer volunteer at my kid's event? Does having the policy reinforce and send the signal that we do encourage volunteers and we want to do it in a way that's very safe for our kids? So as I weigh it 50-50, blah, 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 probably coming out 51% on let's do it, and then this is good by me.
So the safety piece, that won't change no matter what.
No, but
So
this is a
piece-
discoverable reinforcement of our practice, which could be important to people.
Mm-hmm. Would anybody else like to weigh in on the need for this?
What I found, I kept coming back to the statement just below 2.0 about not assuming primary responsibility for instruction, but reinforcing. And I found that sort of an important thing to be saying because, as a policy, because you might have volunteers actually thinking, or there might be this sense that it's a volunteer who is actually coming in to do the primary instruction or to participate in it. I think it's sort of a murky area, and I think it's helpful to have this statement so that people know that they're really there to enhance what's already going on. On the other hand, we might want to think about not having that necessarily be the case.
No, I agree with you. I think it's good, because I could also imagine parents wanting to know that, quote, crudely stated, it's not the volunteer that's teaching their kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's really the
Yeah,
teacher who's
yeah,
doing it,
yeah.
and the volunteer augments the
Yes.
process.
Mhm.
So,
I'd like a little a little more reflection. I'm kind of getting the sense that I do like to have, maybe it is redundant, but I'm personally kind of feeling swayed that I'm kind of a sticker for having things written down. You know, the simplest way to state what you were saying is covering oneself, or covering in case something were to whatever, questions arise, or whatever, something is written down. I guess that's just usually where I usually sit with things. I understand your argument, though.
I mean, I'd go with the will of the board. I would probably get rid of it, but I don't like things written down.
As an English teacher.
Yeah, it's all up here.
if we were to continue with the policy as presented tonight, are there any concerns of what's written here, or things that you would like us to look at? Just reminding the board, at our next meeting, you still have the option to pass it or not to pass it.
Yeah, so speaking as an English major, there is in the first sentence here, I think what you mean to say is expanded and enhanced individualized instruction. D should be there.
Thank you.
And then the sentence that I was bringing attention to earlier, I think could be tightened up. Independent School District 623, I don't think also
Yeah.
works in there, and also those volunteers is kind of weird. So I would read that as Independent School District 623 recognizes that volunteers working with, and so on.
Thank you.
And then the other comment made earlier about somewhere in here we need to specify that this is relating to adults.
Yes.
Right.
That would be the other.
Yes.
Also, it's written as 800 up here. Is it 808 or is it 800, or have you changed the number? It's a typo.
808.
Thank you.
Because you hadn't put that second zero in red.
Yes, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. So we will make the changes. We'll bring it back. Is there something else?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, since we're adding that we're doing a criminal history check, then playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
I've been volunteering at my kids' school since they were in kindergarten. So let's say I volunteer when my kids in kindergarten. I do my my criminal history check. At what point should I get another? I think it's not unreasonable to assume at some point, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 2 years that I should do another? Be expected to sign another form? Is it every time? Is it every year?
At this particular time, we do not say once you've done one that it has to be redone. I think there are just recently some new conversations out and about of how often a background check should be done. I don't know if there's a best practice yet, but it's just something I've just started hearing about. And so at this point, our district has not gone down that road. It's not to say that we won't be looking at that because of some of the new things that people are talking about. And from looking at some data, as I gathered this, I believe there's one district that said every 5 years you needed to have the background check redone. That is something that I think our district would have to have some careful thought about, what that would mean and how we implemented what we would do. And at this point in time, when we do background checks, we do request if the person can afford or is willing to help us offset the cost of it, that they help offset the cost of it. And we do once in a while pay for some of them
How much does it
onto
cost?
the district. There are like 4 different costs, and I believe right now we're looking at $20. I think $20. So we've kind of averaged it out. Depending on if you've lived in other states, there's different ones, so we've just averaged it.
Does the consent form itself have a term? Like if I were to sign
No.
it, so it's actually open-ended.
It is open.
So then, just by practice, the district could do it every 3 years or it's just based on an original consent form.
Yep.
Then maybe we don't need to address
Yeah.
it.
I've never seen a consent form yet that has dates on it.
Yeah.
I believe at some point that may be coming, but I do not see that happening quite yet. I will.
Questions or comments?
I guess just to finish, you know,
Yes.
I understand and approve that we do this already, but again, my concern is like when you do write something down, okay, let's see, then this is a question that someone is going to ask, and we really, if we're going to write this, if we're going to put this in here, I think we should have a plan for when these consent forms, need to, when you have to do it again. So that's just me.
Would, at this point in time, would you feel comfortable if we said that we would be investigating this, but that I don't believe I could bring back best practices or even some answers to you by the next school board meeting? So, I mean, that's one of the things to think about down the road is whether you are willing to look at this and pass this at our next board meeting, or whether you'd rather have us do the background around this particular topic and bring it all back at one time.
Well, it feels to me a little bit like perhaps that's a procedure, that we say we have to have the background check, but usually procedures say exactly when, etc. Would that be a comfortable thing, or just the fact that we say we request that you look at it and implement it in procedures what best practices are, and not have it at the policy level because best practices may change over time? Or is that not an acceptable approach?
I would say, Kitty, that's how we've handled it in the past. Thank you for bringing that up.
So,
Okay, so-
and this is based on, this reflects state law.
No?
No, it's just us.
It's just
Just
us.
us.
The background check is state law. The rest is us.
What does the state law say, if anything, about frequency of background checks?
I believe it's silent on it right now.
Got it.
All right, so where does, we'll follow this through, that where does one find out, since it's not in the policy? Where does a volunteer, a would-be volunteer find out how often they have to pay $20 to get
At this point, it's not written in any of our, because we have not done that practice. Once you have a background check, we have not gone back to redo background checks or to ask our volunteers to redo their background checks.
So if, I would rather not take action on it next meeting and then have you come back after and have to potentially take action on it again. I'd rather give you the time to investigate, see if there are best practices out there, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, and add that in as perhaps your recommendation for how we could address it and deal with it at that time. So I would say, and that's, if we do that, does this first reading still carry over if we defer it for a meeting or two? Do we have to have another first reading, or can we defer until she finds out what she needs to?
Well, I think just a couple of thoughts that maybe that don't directly answer that
Yeah.
question. But, so this policy as is written tonight, this first reading, is reflective of our current practice. So it seems to me there's a number of ways the board could go with this. As was brought up earlier by Karen, you just could say we don't have policy. A lot of districts don't. We will still have regulations and procedures that staff will communicate about to volunteers. Or you can have a policy, and that policy could be reflective of current practice now, with the thinking that this is a better representation than what we currently have written down. thought that we would come back soon to investigate this topic that we haven't investigated, and that we don't know how much is out there. Because it seems to me I would see a process whenever we do this that might include people from a lot of different departments that have volunteers. What are best practices, but what also works for, like in my program or this program, and weigh all that, and that may take some time. So in the absence, we can keep a policy that maybe isn't as updated, or we can update it and still reflect current practices, and whenever we get to the point of having a process, then bring a revised one back, which you wouldn't have to do either if you're, to Kitty's point, just putting it in regulations, because then it would be written in regulations. Regulations typically aren't out there for people to see, but they are referenced, and if someone challenges them, you still have it in writing that you can point to, this is what the district does.
One, I guess my reaction is we tend to keep policies at a fairly high level, and specifying the frequency of how often we need to have a criminal background check seems to me to be a procedural level decision, not a policy level decision. But that's, I mean, I'm certainly open to doing it differently, but that's how we have done policies, is keep them at a governance level.
Could we take half a bite of the apple and add a clause to 2.6 that says something like frequency or repetition of criminal history checks will be set by the district? Like so it implies there will be potentially a repeat at some point, but it just mentions that the district will determine what that frequency should be, or the period of time should be, without specifying what it is.
Certainly.
See what I'm saying?
I understand the concern that, maybe somebody could use another, I understand that. But I feel like we're going down a different avenue maybe than we need to. I agree with you, Kitty. I don't think we need to put it in there. We don't even need this policy. I mean, I'm just going to say it, we don't. And if it's state law that we have a criminal check, we have a criminal check. I don't know what can of worms we're going to open if we all of a sudden start requiring every 3 years that they have to get background checks, or every 5 years, or whatever it may be. There might be some consequences of that action that us at the board are not going to feel necessarily, but that our staff could feel. And I completely understand being safe with our students, but that's something to consider as well. And I don't know how long people volunteer in a school, and I mean, I can't predict that. Have we had an issue where somebody all of a sudden, I mean, is this,
Not that I'm aware of.
are we putting, so.
Well, I think one of the things I can tell you just from past experience in working, or hearing others working with them on this issue, is there's also different types of volunteering, and which might require different levels or frequency of background checks. So if you're volunteering and you're always under the supervision of a staff member, in the presence of a staff member, that's sort of a different level than, for instance, if you're alone with a student. And so it may require different frequency or different level of criminal background checks. And so keeping it vague sometimes may have some benefits. But another possibility is to have groups work on it in the future to specify more of that. But I don't think it would necessarily have to be in policy.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure where we are as a board. I think what I'm hearing is possibly a comfort level with not having it in policy. Is that kind of where things are netting, or is that not correct?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Now, of course, this is not an action item.
No, it is not.
No, it's
But
not.
it's
So-
giving some direction,
reading.
what we're
Yeah, when
asking
it
to
comes
come
back
back
as an
for a
action.
second reading.
We'll actually
So
vote at the
that's,
next meeting.
No need to correct it if it's going to come back and just be voted out.
Well, that's true, but, again,
But I don't want her to waste her time
right.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
correcting the policy if
Yeah.
in fact
Right.
there's not a need to.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm trying to get is a consensus from the board on direction for Karen on how to proceed.
I'm comfortable with it remaining vague.
Would you be comfortable, Curtis?
Sure.
So what I'm hearing is there's a need for procedures that will follow up this policy that gives the details of how it will be dealt with. That would have to be developed. Is that what we're
so-
asking?
Right, so that she does not need to investigate that for inclusion in the policy at that level of detail. Right. And then I have a question just on how we do it. So this was the first reading. The second reading, we'll vote on accepting the revisions or not.
We'll vote on
We'll
approval of
accepting
the policy.
the policy. So it would either be as revised, or if we vote no, then it just goes away totally.
Well, it could be several things. It could be we approve the policy.
Right.
It could be we delete the policy.
Right.
It could be we want these further additions or changes to be made, and we will approve it in a future.
Right.
So
But all
we
those
always have
levels, all those levels of decision could happen at the
Depends
same
on the
time.
motion.
next
Yes.
week. Got it. Okay.
So
Absolutely.
I can make a motion to
Depends
get rid of
what
it.
I can pass or fail. Yeah, it's true. And then that passes or fails, and if
Yeah.
the motion to
Yeah.
delete it fails, then we would
Then we-
move on
to whether we
we
accept it
accept
as
the
revised.
revisions. Yep, okay.
They're all
Excellent.
possible. Okay.
Or not.
Thank you
We
very much.
probably didn't realize how much discussion we were
Well, no,
It is-
I
you know, you never know which one is gonna reach out and grab you, you know?
I'm happy to say we are a very thorough board.
That's right. Very good. Yeah, what was that comment about nerd pen?
That's right. That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
We will
Karen.
see
Thank
you
you.
at the next
Thank you.
board meeting then.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Alicia, for bringing the new policies to us. Okay, now we're ready to move on to our facilities planning update. And we have Sherry Thompson, our business manager.
Good evening. So yes, we'd just like to give you a brief update on our facilities planning process. At the last board meeting, you approved contracts for our construction manager, the architect, and then also the district engineer for our long-term facility maintenance projects, and also for the building bond projects. So we have put together some committees. We have a core planning group that is working and meeting weekly with contractors. And then we also have a district oversight team that has recently met, that will meet every few weeks. And that consists of district leadership. And then also we have 3 board members that are part of that. And that is Director Shaw and Chair Goggins and Treasurer Todd Anderson. So we've got that committee together. Our architect has gone out to each of the sites and done walkthroughs with the principals. They're putting together some subcommittees at each of the buildings, really starting, some of the schematic design. And then we'll have updates as we move forward. We're really putting together kind of that overall master calendar. We likely won't see we'll likely see some new construction starting this fall at a couple of the sites. The primary focus right now is on the high school, and then likely Little Canada first as far as new construction, because those seem to be where we have the biggest pressure points as far as enrollment. But those schedules, that overall schedule, will be coming together in the next month or so, and we will bring that to the board and share that at that time. And then also, once you've had a look at that, we will get that out for the community as well. So I think that's about it as far as what's been happening the last few weeks. But yes, we're very excited to move forward.
Are there any questions on the facilities?
Just a quick one as far as, where are we in terms of just the community participation? Did we get a lot of responses? Have we solicited that yet?
So we haven't solicited that yet. We'll likely see more of the community input in the areas or with some of the facilities such as Fairview.
Right, on the school. Or
Yeah,
site-by-site
maybe
basis.
the auditorium at the high school. We are also working into the master schedule because we have our schematic design phase, and then we'll have the developmental design phase. So at the end of each of those phases, we will be holding a community meeting.
And how-
where
what's
we
the-
can get feedback.
I'm sorry. Thank you. What's the process by which the solicitation of community involvement will occur? Because whether we,
Sure.
because we did get some feedback last time
Mm-hmm.
that not everyone knew even things were going on, and we thought we did a pretty good job. And fairness is sometimes, if not almost always, in the eye of the beholder. So, are we attempting to do a little differently, or different channels of communication to open it up? Because it's the usual suspects
Yes.
come every single time, and maybe get a little broader input of different parts of different communities. If we can just describe what the intent is there.
So as far as I mentioned, each of the schools has a subcommittee. I think primarily we'll see staff. As a matter of fact, each school site, there'll be a staff kickoff meeting. They're also going to invite at the sites, whether it be the PTSA, the principal will be putting that together. As far as the broader community goes, we will be using our 623 Today newsletter to communicate. We're also going to try and target certain groups. Actually, Karen Schaub had mentioned some of the groups that gather, some of the community groups, to seek out input from those groups. And then also we will be, we had over 100 people that participated in one of the phases as far as when we were planning, when we were doing the facility planning. And we have all of those email addresses, so we'll send out a communication to that group as well.
Because even at the site level, and I know it's easier, kind of tried and true,
Mhm.
but I would hope we can encourage principals to go beyond just PTA, PTO, PSA.
Right.
Because there are a lot of folks out there that, for whatever reason, don't participate actively in the parent-teacher groups, but still might have a huge interest and bring great thoughts and talents to this process, but could never be reached if the principals rely primarily on the PT organizations.
Right, and I know some of the groups, and Karen can weigh in if she'd like, but I know some of the groups that we talked about is, there was regular gatherings, for instance, for Abbott. Also for our ABE students, our adult learners. So we plan on targeting some of those as far as soliciting
Different
feedback.
clubs, different groups.
And we're also watching that balance because, we certainly don't want to do this in haste. We've done the conceptual drawings. So we're trying to move the process forward. We want to get bids out like the 1st of July because our plan is if, we can get 3 solid years of work and keep people on site, especially with the labor shortage, and put things together in big packages. So we want that input and we're trying to keep the process moving. So at the same time, so yes, it's a little tricky, but those
It
were
is,
the
yeah.
groups.
We have our pre-K families, which I think would be wonderful to start getting them to start seeing the different ways they can participate. We also have some Unity Center nights where we're bringing in our parents and we're having some discussion groups between now and the end of the year. We're starting a parent group, so there would be some of those areas that I think where we could invite some new and different parents to partake and talk with us.
Good. Thank
So
you.
we are doing some of that outreach wherever we can.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Sure.
Just one of the comments that I was impressed that your principal Hester at the high school has been speaking to parents and students about this, and somewhat in line with what you were saying, that I think the construction manager had a recommendation, or the goal is that every single site group have parents on it. We want to get students involved where it's appropriate, at the appropriate levels. And I know that Principal Hester, I think, already has some parents and some students to help out at the Ross site. So I was encouraged to see that participation already coming out.
Yeah, that's great. And especially at the high school, and at that level, the students are invaluable. And there's a lot of community usage at that facility.
Okay, thank you very much. That moves us on to action items. The next item we have is the 2017-2018 budget revisions. Sherry's staying here to cover it.
So I'm staying here to talk about that. So just, excuse me, some highlights. Obviously, you know, the board adopts the budget at their last meeting in June prior to the start of the fiscal year. We're just starting that budget development process right now for next year, and we'll talk more about that on the next agenda item. But when we put things together, we're estimating enrollment, we're estimating maybe salaries, especially if we have retirees that are leaving. Some years we're estimating. We are also estimating what the legislature will do, because such was the case last spring, although the legislature did finish up their business and we are able to incorporate the 2% increase in the state funding formula into the preliminary budget. So we put all of that together in the spring, and then when we're midway through the year, we go back and revisit the budget, and we look both at the revenue side, and again, the big factor there that drives the revenues is enrollment, and then we also look at our expenditure side. We may be estimating in the spring salary as far as, you know, if we have staff turnover, and at this point we know who are in the positions that we had open. So we revised to actual. I guess the one factor that we have out there is our largest bargaining unit, the teachers. We're in the process of negotiating a new contract that actually went into effect on July 1st. So we make some assumptions and estimate where we think that salary settlement will come in. But again, this is our mid-year process as far as the budget goes. So, and this is a summary. So if you look at the top part of this sheet, the upper half really deals with our general fund. The general fund it covers our day-to-day operating expenses. It's the majority of our budget. That top line, looking at our unassigned fund balance, we're beginning the year with an unassigned fund balance of $2,285,000. So that's where we started the year. In our preliminary budget, we had estimated revenues of $87.3 million. Now that we have revised the budget, looking at our enrollment, we're up a net of about 24 students over what we had projected. In addition, we have now added a voluntary pre-K program. We've received a grant, or that was approved through the state. And then we've had some adjustments in our special ed revenue as well. So we're actually estimating that our overall revenue in the unassigned will increase by just under $400,000, $399,000, for a total of $87.7 million. Then as far as looking at our unassigned fund balance on the expenditure side, we had estimated initially that our expenditures would be $86,892,000. We're actually estimating that we'll see an increase there in our final expenses of $621,000 approximately, for a total of $87.5 million. Again, the expenditures reflect actual salaries now that we have employees in open positions. An increase of about $373,000 in that voluntary pre-K program, salaries, benefits, and supplies for that program. And then we've also estimated, which we had in the original budget, but again, this includes that estimated salary increase for open contracts. The net of this is that we will have a surplus on the current year budget of $219,626, so about $220,000. The preliminary budget had actually assumed a little bit higher surplus of about $440,000, but there again, we're estimating that overall we will be increasing that fund balance slightly to about $2.5 million, which is about 2.4% of the total general fund balance. The next line, just as a reminder, you'll see that non-spendable. That's something where we need to categorize. The majority of that is inventory, like our fuel inventory for the buildings, and then also any prepaid expenses. So these were expenses that we had incurred prior to June 30th of 2017, prior to the start of the new fiscal year. They were items, about 500,000 of this is items that we had paid in 16-17, but that were actually for 17-18. And our auditors require that we report this because they're dollars that we've already incurred the expense. So the total fund balance there is about $3.3 million. And again, that's in the unrestricted or area. Within the general fund, we do have some restricted fund balances. These are restricted or mandated by the legislature, by the state. In most cases, in these restricted accounts, we actually spend in excess of what our revenue is in many cases, but we can't carry a negative fund balance. So for the most part, these restricted accounts zero out. We have to set aside 2% for staff development. Our compensatory education, that's also known as basic skills, that includes our comp ed, and then also our ELL funding, English language learners. We set aside so there's a restriction for learning and development. That's meant to try and keep class size down at the elementary. We have funds, set aside funds for our gifted and talented program. School safety, that's really, school safety is really about physical hazards or keeping students safe. Health and safety is more like an environmental safety element. I will point out that health and safety is being phased out, and if you go 2 lines down, that's been combined into long-term facilities maintenance funding. So that's why you don't see any activity in that health and safety fund. And then one of our biggest reserves then is operating capital. Operating capital really covers technology, curriculum supplies like textbooks, equipment, fixtures, and furnishings within the general fund. I'd like to just quickly touch on the operating capital fund. We began the year with a fund balance there of $1,578,000. Looking at our revenues were anticipating an increase of about $31,000 over what we had was included in the preliminary budget. And there again, that's due to the increase in student enrollment. Looking at our expenditures, we're not looking at revising the expenditures in the operating capital, but we are spending down this operating capital fund balance. And the reason that we're seeing that reduction there is we do code we have for the last couple of years, and we'll be changing this now or adjusting the number going forward. We have some tech support salaries, about $600,000, that we are allowed by law to code to operating capital. And as we move forward next year, we'll adjust that number downward, but we've been spending about $600,000 or charging about $600,000 of those tech support salaries to operating capital, and that's why you see that as a deficit. So now that fund balance will be drawing down to about $900,000. We really don't want to see that fund balance go under $500,000. So that we have, some type of reserve there. So again, that's why we'll look at adjusting that next year. So overall, looking, you'll also see the long-term facility maintenance, or LTFM. So that includes deferred maintenance and then also our health and safety. And that fund balance We typically don't carry a large fund balance there. So then looking at our total general fund, we're looking at total revised revenue of $103,600,000. Looking at the expenses, the revised expenses, those are $104,055,000, and we overall, as far as the total general fund, not the unassigned, the total, and the majority of this again is from that operating capital deficit, would be drawing down the total general fund balance by about $437,000. Moving on then, the district's other funds, we have our food service fund. Our food service fund, for the most part, we receive is fee-based. We also do receive some federal and state funding for that. We are anticipating that our revenues will be about $72,000 less than what we had originally estimated. The reason for that is we're seeing some of our federal and state money go down. We've actually seen a slight reduction in the last couple of years in our free and reduced counts. And a lot of that is due to the, some of the improvement in the economy. Also, in an effort to comply with the Healthy Foods or Healthy Kids Food Act, we have been changing up our menu as far as a la carte at the secondary level, and actually our sales are down a little bit because of that. Yes.
Right, not a question for you, Sherry, but we talked about this a couple minutes ago, and I think we're going to try to have a meeting where the food services nutrition person will come and talk about that a little bit.
She absolutely will.
Okay.
She's excited to do that. We'll get that
Try to
figured
get
out
her
in the
on
agenda.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Just understand what's going on and why.
I know, I think we did too.
It's part of the big report, I believe.
Yes.
I have to have the calendar in front of me.
Yeah, I'll look at it. I want to say it's April or May.
Okay,
But yes, we'll look at that, and she is excited to come
great.
and share.
As anybody would be.
And then she can tell you about, Minnesota Thursdays, the first Thursday of every month
Yeah.
Yes.
on our menus.
Yeah, I want to be there.
What's up?
It's their Minnesota produced
stuff.
products.
Oh, cool.
And yes,
Snow ice cream.
and they are, yes, they're very good. And as a matter of fact, since we're talking about food service, I'm going to put this plug in. You had actually approved on your consent agenda a couple months ago. She had applied for a farm to school grant of about $25,000, and that was approved for the state.
Cool.
So that's going to help replace. We're taking out a deep fryer at the high school that will be replaced with a convection oven, which is also
That's newsworthy.
healthy.
Right?
And
That's newsworthy.
yes, and some additional equipment.
Cool.
Mike in that photo with his KFC.
There you go. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Tonight I backslid, but I'm kind of a foodie. So the farm to table thing, that's a really big deal.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And she's got partnerships with the Good Acre. She can tell you all about them. It's very exciting.
Cool. It's in the Roseville Review recently.
Was it?
Yes, a lengthy article.
So that lets you know, I don't necessarily always read the Roseville Review.
Well, I'll send that article to you electronically.
That'd be
I'll make sure you
helpful.
get that because it was quite a lengthy article.
Okay.
Okay, so I should continue on with the budget. So at the same time, we're looking at reducing our expenses in the food service fund. But we're looking to just about break even in food service. So our fund balance would be about $325,000. The other notable or change, actually there are a couple of them, in our community service fund, you will see we are estimating an increase in our revenues from what was in the preliminary budget. We're estimating an increase of about $333,000. Much of this is increase in participation in the after-school child care program. We're seeing an increase there. And then also looking at the expenses, we're seeing an increase in expenses as well. And some of that is the Friendship Connection, but also changes or increases in our ECFE and our adult high school as far as on the expenditure side. So we're anticipating that we're going to draw that fund balance down slightly by about $225,000. And that, you know, the community service fund balance is within the target area. That's a healthy fund balance. Now, the one big change that you'll see under the construction fund, and we're really putting this together until we can get a little bit more information from our contractor and our construction manager. This does reflect, you'll see that, you know, we had 0 in there for revenue at the beginning in the preliminary budget. Now we have $154 million. That reflects the proceeds from the bond sale, the construction bonds, the $144 million, and then $11 million from long-term facility maintenance bonds. So we've got that reflected in the revenue. And then if you move over to the right, you'll see on the expenditures, right now, I mean, we're estimating about $3 million likely in fees. And again, that's construction manager, engineering, it's just design work. And then we'll see those fees. We'll get a more concrete schedule per se as that plan comes together. So we're estimating that we'll have about $151 million at the end of the year. And we actually receive the proceeds from those construction bonds next week, and they will be invested. So overall, the other, looking at the debt service fund, the OPEB debt, the scholarship, we don't have any changes there as far as on the revised budget. So that's what I have. I don't know if there are questions.
Any questions? Looks like it's clear. Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
You still don't get to get away.
No, because now we'll talk about next year.
Yes, the
We have
2000.
to
Oh, yes.
vote that.
Vote.
There's that.
We have to accept.
Okay.
I move that we accept the revised budget as presented.
Do I have a second? So Todd seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, so we've moved on, we've accepted the budget parameters, or we've accepted the budget revisions. Now we will move on to budget parameters and timeline.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we just completed the mid-year revision. We have begun putting together the 18-19 budget. Actually, we've been talking about it for some time and putting some assumptions together. At the study session earlier this month, we had gone through some of these parameters. I do want to point out a typo that I just realized as we were going through. That second paragraph, when you look at general fund parameters, the district anticipates ending the 17-18 fiscal year with a 2.4%, and I will get that corrected and get that to Michelle so it's in the permanent packet rather than a 2.75. That should have been changed once we finished our mid-year revisions, and I apologize for that. Again, you know, the parameters talk about the board's target fund balance of 3% of the annual budget. I think, you know, the good news in the current year budget is we do have a surplus of about $220,000, so we're slowly building that up towards that 3% target fund balance. As far as assumptions on the revenue side, we do know from the legislature, from the 2017 legislature, that our funding formula is increasing by 2%. So that basic funding formula will increase $124 per pupil to $6,312. We also do have an excess operating referendum in place that is in effect through the 21-22 school year. We also have an inflationary factor there. Typically, the inflation is right around 2%. This next year, it'll be 2.02. So we will generate $1,604 per pupil unit in an excess operating referendum. Our levy revenue is based on what was certified in December. We have had a new funding formula for the state special ed aid that was first implemented in 15-16. It works off of previous year data, so it's more predictable than the old formula, but we continue to monitor that because it also has an inflationary cap on it. Our enrollment parameters, we look at our enrollment. Typically what we do we have found that February 1st enrollment is a good number for us, and then we have a cohort model that we use to advance that forward, so we'll continue to do that. Looking at some of our expenditure or budget parameters, we do put the focus, our resources on equity and student achievement. When we look at changes in enrollment, that drives even at whether it's at the school level, at grade levels, staffing adjustments. We make staffing adjustments with enrollment changes. So if numbers go up or down, if certain populations go up or down, we do adjust the staffing, whether it's classroom teachers, specialists, or in the area of student services. Enrollment again drives the staffing. And we have, we will be building in estimated salary settlements for the contract negotiations there. On the backside, there's a couple of more items there. We look at staff retirements and adjust accordingly. We don't anticipate an increase in the amount that the district, you have dollar-defined contributions in all of the labor agreements, and we don't anticipate increasing those dollar amounts, those contributions for next year. And our federal programs, that fluctuates a little bit, so we never spend more in federal programs than what we generate in revenue. And then talks a little bit about the different reserve funds that we have, and those are, again, we just spend those in compliance with state statute. We will continue to update the board throughout this process. We have the district leadership team that's been working on developing some of the budget parameters and assumptions, and we will continue to work with principals and program supervisors, and then we will have our public budget hearing on May 22nd. And there's also a timeline that's included and kind of hits some of those dates. That's also included in your packet. So that's what I have on budget parameters.
You don't mention in your budget parameters, maybe you mentioned, and I lost it.
Yeah.
This $600,000, which has to come out of a different fund.
And
next
actually,
year.
we could include
I mean, it
that
seems
in
like
there, because it is changed.
it's a important.
Yes, because I mentioned it, but you're
expenditure.
right. So I will make mention of that in the area of like reserves. That will be shifting. That's a really good point.
I mean, it's a difficult constraint to
Because-
work with.
yes.
It ought to be mentioned here.
Yep, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the budget parameters and timeline.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Discussion? Any comments or questions beyond what Frank pointed out?
Thanks, Frank.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, we have approved the budget parameters timeline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. That moves us to resolution for fully funded special education services. We'll actually have two related motions. We'll begin with the Minnesota one, and Dr. Alicia Mobley is here to present that.
So I'll be sharing this time with two other board members today who will start us off, and then I will finish.
Sure. So, as we recall, we discussed this briefly last time, I think, in the study session, right?
Right.
Where at the recent MSBA delegate assembly that Director Hayes and I attended, the MSBA asked that every school board in the state consider adopting, approving two resolutions related to special education funding. One directed at the federal level, which would encourage the Congress to basically pay up on its obligation and what it's promised in terms of funding for special ed, and the other aimed at the state level with the same general message, but also a specific request that a task force be formed at the legislative level to look into this and really get things settled and make things right once and for all in terms of the appropriate dollars being released and allocated to the schools. So we're part of a movement that the MSBA hopes will be happening throughout the state this month, and if these are approved, then we will send the approved resolutions or the fact of our approving them to MSBA so they can then move in February in delivering them through whatever process they have, their lobbyists or whatever, to both the Minnesota legislature and the federal Congress. So that's kind of the background. Is that enough to lead into?
Please, Chuck.
So yes, I have 5 points that I want to make just for context before I move forward with the potential adoption. So the first is the special education services are mandated, as we know, and they have never been fully funded. There's been a promise to fund about 40%. However, it's been most likely at 15%. So the cross subsidy that we're talking about in both resolutions is the gap between what is funded and what the expenses are. So obviously the number continues to rise, and some of the reasons why: the cost of services, and then the number of scholars receiving special education for our state and nationwide. So this resolution, which I'm excited to just be a part of, would really ask for us to just have more equitable funding for special education. And so the resolution, more specifically, would urge the governor and also the legislature to advocate for these increases and also form the task force which you mentioned. And so I will say that there's someone at the table that's already been recruited for the task force. I will say no names. So we're hoping that not only board members support this with MSBA, but also superintendents could possibly speak to this as well. So thank you for considering possibly.
It was just an initial conversation. It was not initiated by Dr. Molly.
It was not.
Or me.
Just a little levity for tonight. So I'm excited to just bring that information to you as our expenditures continue to rise. Just for the last point, our cross subsidy is currently at $679 million, which is a 5% increase from last year. So that's a lot of money. So it is our hope that we will continue to get as much money as we can for the scholars who are receiving special education services.
I have a motion for the resolution.
So
No, I need somebody to.
Somebody needs to move.
read it.
Move it.
Oh, move.
Well,
I agree.
we can bypass the
I
actual
waive
reading the full,
reading the whole resolution.
for the full resolution.
Okay.
But I would still need a motion to approve the resolution for fully funded.
You wanna do that?
I would like to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Excellent. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So discussion. I know we had an opportunity to have our conversation at the last session, and this is not a new issue, unfortunately. It is an ongoing issue that just continues to grow because it wasn't addressed. We did get some relief a little bit at the legislature in the last couple of years, but unfortunately it still continues to become more and more of a problem.
Just one caveat, we should probably make sure that we're clear that this first one we're doing is for the Minnesota. There are two separate resolutions, right? So,
Chair Goggins, I'll add too, since I was at the delegate assembly when we discussed this, it was very important that they felt that Minnesota had a united voice in asking for help from our state and from our nation to fully fund our special ed students. And although I'm going to say it, it may seem a little bit symbolic, sometimes it's those symbols that get the fire started. So I'm really happy that we're doing this as a district.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of, this has to be a roll call vote, I assume, since it's a resolution? Is that
Yep.
correct?
So shall the clerk call the roll?
Yes, please.
Director Azar?
Aye.
Director Shaw?
Aye.
Chair Goggins?
Aye.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Treasurer Anderson?
Aye.
And Clerk Boguszewski also votes aye. Thank you.
Excellent. So that moves us to the next resolution.
So the next resolution is very similar. Matter of fact, they're almost identical except for the last line, which includes, if you look at the last line, which includes additional information regarding the Secretary and Senate, and also it includes the federal special education, mandates. So they're almost similar, and that's all.
I'll move that we approve the resolution directed towards the federal level about the special education funding.
I'll second that.
Second for Tom.
Oh, yeah, and waive the reading. Do I have to say that officially?
Yes.
Waive the reading, move the reading. There you go.
Excellent. Any discussion on this one?
Another roll call, correct?
Okay. Who seconded? I wasn't.
I did.
Todd
Okay,
seconded.
Okay, Director Azar?
Aye.
Director Shaw?
Aye.
Chair Goggins?
Aye.
Director Johnson?
Aye.
Treasurer Anderson?
Aye.
Clerk Boguszewski votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that moves us to item 7E, which is support for the purchase and exchange of school trust lands in boundary water canoe area wilderness proceeding in Canada. This is another resolution, and Superintendent Sokol.
Sure, I'll make some introductory remarks. So, this was discussed at the last school board study session, or the meeting, right? And so in 1858, the federal government set aside some land in the state that could generate some revenue for schools in Minnesota. And recently, a few years ago, there was an executive director hired to try to get more out of those lands. It was identified that there's 83,000 acres of this land in the boundary waters, canoe area, wilderness area, and so there's a proposal out there to swap it for some land in northern Minnesota and to generate more revenue. And part of what, because I heard presentations on this, read some things from MSBA and AMSD who supported this. I also saw something with Representative Nolan's name and signature on it supporting this. But of course, that might be just more from the economic development side and not the sort of the ecological or side of it, environmental. Yes, thank you. Is the word I was looking for. So try to look into more of that. And just all we found in our little bit of searching was about, they said plans for normal timber harvesting in this state land that would be traded. But I think since then, in a conversation I had with Chair Goggins, I think she has researched and found out more of the area that's in the land swap. And I think so I'm sure she's going to share as this presentation this topic. So.
Actually, I believe.
Yeah, so,
Oh, okay.
I looked into it.
You showed it to me, so I didn't realize it.
Fairly deeply. So there is some controversy over this up among our friends in the northern part of the state. And it mostly has to do with the potential for these parcels of land, which will be transferred from U.S. Forest Service ownership to school trust and therefore DNR management. DNR, I guess, manages the school trust land as part of the land swap. And some of the parcels are particular parcels where they know there are people are interested in mining, and so there is some alarm among environmentalists, particularly the Sierra Club, about the possibility that mining would then proceed here. Under the U.S. Forest Service has to act under an act called the Weeks Act, which prohibits a lot of this mineral development, or at least has a I'm not familiar deeply with how it works, but the sense is that constrains mineral development, whereas and that would be gone as soon as it's managed by the state. Of course, the state we think of as being responsible in how they deal with it. And I read through the environmental impact statement, which was developed for this, about this. It runs on 60 pages. It's a long document. But in as they cover the mineral rights possibilities, the environmental impact statement is actually quite neutral about it, saying that in fact it's possible for exceptions to the Weeks Act on a case-by-case basis. So the U.S. Forest Service might develop this for mineral rights by themselves. Nevertheless, it is perceived by people who are looking at this very carefully that this is something of an end run around the Weeks Act, that this allows development to take place that could potentially be quite harmful, polluting, because the parcels are on the divide between the Rainy River watershed and the St. Louis River watershed, polluting in both directions. There's quite alarming literature on this. So from that standpoint, as I say, the environmental, so MSBA is not mentioning it in this, and wasn't brought up when we talked about it earlier. And I can imagine why that's true, because the environmental impact statement, as I say, is quite neutral about it. But there are people out there who are not neutral about it. Yes.
So a couple questions.
At the conference, sorry.
Yeah.
Follow.
Oh,
Well,
so
I was just, this probably obviously didn't come out, but what, again, kind of going to what Frank said too, just what Director Shaw, just what was the discussion like at the conference about this? Feedback or just?
To be quite honest, I thought about that when we brought this up the last time. Why is this here?
Mhm.
I don't know why this is here. I was shocked. This is not what, Mike and I did not bring this.
No, I brought that
Yeah.
in because we were
So it
encouraged to do that by MSBA and by MSBA.
And they did not encourage us at that time to do this one.
so it did pass MSBA,
Yeah.
but this potential issue did not arise at all. The mood of delegates really focused on the unfairness of this land that's supposed to be ours, so to speak,
Locked up.
being locked up by someone else. So the potential, if I may put it in its most cynical form, that there are special interests out there that are using the educational system basically as a pawn to ultimately gain control by offering megabucks to rape the land was not brought up.
Yeah.
Not that it's most negative or something.
Yeah, that's right. And I would back off from language like that.
Absolutely.
But
That's why I didn't say it.
yeah, no. But I would say, just from the general standpoint, this is not. It does not generate a whole lot of income for us in its current form. It's about $30 per student.
Statewide.
Per year. And so that's a teeny amount for the sort of $9,000 per student the state funds. And as reading through it, my feeling is that school trust lands in that wilderness are a good thing in themselves. And okay, they're not producing as much revenue as possible, but there were arguments that the state could perhaps put some pressure on the federal management of that wilderness, because there is income from that, from people going in and buying permits in there, and that they might share some of that, given, and then it's a school trust land I think in a more wholesome sense. So
Well-
I would recommend against recommending that this sale or this land swap take place.
And to continue the theme, if the current income generated is so minimal, then yes, one could say, well, then the fight isn't really about the current income.
Yeah.
The fight is about the potential income.
Yes, yeah, that's right. It is.
And could pressure be put to increase that income in a way that maintains the integrity of the value of the land itself,
Mhm,
versus the real value would be a sell-off,
Mhm.
whether that's to mining interests or whatever.
Mhm,
So it kind of feeds into the fear, like, well, why do you want this really?
Yeah.
Because as it stands, if you're just going to keep it like it is, operating it like it is, it's not worth worrying about. The real value would be if you got control over it and sold it off. That would be the fear.
Mhm.
I think the fear is really that the specific parcels of interest are of interest because they are attractive to
Right.
mining.
Right.
And then sulfide mining
Mhm.
would be the specific operation that has interest in that land. And so the belief would be is that there's significant potential that would move forward, because otherwise why would the swap being want?
Right.
And as Frank pointed out, that the rationale is because of the change in hands now, there are less restrictions on what can do with the land, which
Right.
is why there's the mining interests have an interest in it going to the schools.
Sure. And just a further question about that, which you may not know about the Weeks Act itself.
Mhm.
That I'm assuming that's a congressional act.
Yes.
And so this is not something that the administrative branch could, by fiat, work around. Because as we know, I would say that there could be more risk now for the
Absolutely.
administrative branch there's ever
Absolutely.
been into, encroachments on environmental
Yeah.
stuff.
Mhm, mhm.
So
That I don't
keeping it-
know, but I would say predicting what the administration is going to do is
sure, flip the
fool's
coin.
errand at this point.
Exactly.
But you're right.
The question I'm asking
Yeah,
is
yeah.
is it pretty certain that it actually is safer in
Uh-huh.
the federal hands versus in state hands because of the vicissitudes that
Yeah.
we've seen in the current administration?
Well, of course, and vicissitudes can happen in the state hands as well.
Absolutely.
So I would say that from,
Wait a minute. Vicissitudes, that's not a word I'm familiar with.
Ups and downs, back and forth.
ups and
Viscous?
downs.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, right.
I mean, it's great. I could get it from the context.
Yes.
I just, I mean, am I right? Am I the only one in here that was like, okay, good, thanks. I like
Yes,
it.
I was English
Sorry,
major.
my mom was.
Well, I am too. I don't use vicissitudes in everyday language.
Vicissitudes is a great word.
Well, I'm going to use it tomorrow.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, once you look it up, you'll understand what
I'm in.
particularly applies
I'm
to
in.
the current administration.
100%.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the point is, it implies extremes. You're going from one extreme to another.
Right.
And so
Who initiated this, though?
So,
this has been
I
going
get-
for a while, right?
I mean, I'm sorry. I know you had your
yeah,
hand
so
up.
it came about because I got several, it wasn't one correspondence, several correspondence on 3 resolutions from MSBA.
Right,
The
and I know
2
you did, but I
prior
mean,
to
like,
this.
was it the Department of Education, or was it
Okay,
these
so-
mining,
so-
you know what I mean? Like, who initiated
So I don't
the
know where
idea?
this land swap came,
Okay.
idea. Certainly, the idea to get more from the trust lands, that's been for several years now
Mhm.
in process. And at a recent presentation at AMSD from the executive director, I would say that this idea, I could confidently say that it did not come from the DNR. So I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's something the director supports, and MSBA got behind it because of their understanding of what that it could add to school funding. But the environmental impact is obviously an important consideration.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
Remember, we can further discuss. I would like to move the Roseville School Board does not support the resolution, which is supporting for the purchase and exchange the school trust lands in the Boundary Waters Canoe area proceeding in tandem. So my motion is we do not approve the
Okay. Do we
resolution.
want to make a formal motion to not approve, or do we want to just, do we need to make a motion if we wish to not approve?
I don't think so.
Or do we just bypass?
Yeah, you could vote on it, or I think you could also choose not to vote on it. So if you vote it, you could vote it down.
Yeah, you can't positively vote for it to not have it. You can negatively vote for it to happen, because that's the way the resolution is.
Okay. So the issue is if there's nobody who wishes to move the resolution as stated, then there's no action.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do we have a motion to move the resolution?
gotta ask 3 times.
3 times? Really?
Sorry, thanks.
Do we have a motion to move the resolution? Do we have a motion to move the resolution? Hearing none, we move to the next agenda. Okay, the next agenda item we have is a study session update. Since I did not think of at our study session or afterwards to ask somebody to make, to give an update on this topic, I will handle the update tonight. But when we have our committee assignments at the February work study session, I would like to propose to add to that committee assignments that we define who has what study session to report on for the year. Good idea. So that this doesn't happen every month, and like Mark, that I'm making all the updates. We had 5 agenda items at our study session on January 9th, 3 of which have been part of the agenda today, so have already been covered. Those 3 are the facilities planning update, the 2017-18 budget update, and 2018-19 budget parameters, and the MSBA resolutions. So I will not give any further information on those 3 items, but there were 2 additional items on our agenda. One was response to intervention in elementary schools. We were very fortunate to hear about the interventions regarding math and reading. That it was basically based on 3 ideas: assessment of student performance, effective instruction and intervention, and collaborative teams using data to make instructional decisions. And that there are typically 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the level where all students receive core instruction from their primary teacher, and it meets the needs of about 75 to 90% of the students. Then Tier 2 is focused on selected students based on a universal screener, and helps meet the needs in small groups, and it's usually about 10 to 25% of the population. And then Tier 3 services, which are more intensive, is targeted to a few students that typically happens individually for about 3 to 5% of the population. In the reading area, our district is partnering strongly with the University of Minnesota and using the FAST test that was developed there to assess students' levels, and then using the PRESS curriculum that correlates with it to be able to meet the needs of the students that are identified in the PRESS in the FAST test. This has been a very well-developed area and has a very clear outline of how we proceed. In the math area, we got to hear about the level of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 services also, but this is an area that the district is interested in further developing to make it even stronger into the future. But in both areas, we have our processes in place, and we got to hear about the work that's being done. The second topic, we had was the 9 to 12 summer school review. There has been a group of individuals across the district working on a project to look at the programming and making it more integrated with the school year and making it or providing more engaging and rigorous learning as well as effective credit recovery. And the group had identified a number of different short-term and longer-term strategies that they would like to put in place. In terms of the short-term work that would be impacting this next summer, and they involve around improving a number of the processes around identifying, recruiting students, about how we handle discipline and student support, how we track students, etc., revising the leadership structure, and also looking at enhancing some teacher preparation that to be able to be better prepared for the students coming in. This is particularly important for students that come outside, or teachers that come from outside of our district. And then longer term, some areas were identified as well that we'd like to pursue in future years. So that's just a brief update. Is anything anybody would like to add to that? Okay, that moves us to board reports. Are there any board reports this evening?
I can go first. We had our 9/16 meeting last week. Due to the new year, we had it a week later than we usually do. And we had a couple of conversations. They talked to us about their equity vision and also their gender equity policies and work. And, you know, being from Roseville area schools, it's always interested to hear what other districts are doing, and it always makes me feel really good about what we do here in this district. In 9/16, they're offering the IDI, which we did quite a few years back. It's a kind of a way to test where you are on your cultural journey, if you will, or your equity journey, starting all the way from denial to adaptation. And they're offering that to all the board members, too, with an analysis, sort of somebody to sit down and talk to you about your process and your journey. And I thought, you know, that's been a long time since we've done that. That would be something kind of fun to think about maybe bringing back or discussing again, doing something like that. That was a neat activity we did. There's also two other things that I brought just to show you. One is they're offering for paraprofessionals, and I can just leave this for somebody to, some workshops on, training workshops for paraprofessionals on teaching and behavioral systems, mental health, functional behavior assessment, and the 4 Blocks literacy framework. I'm sure somebody already knows about it in our district, but it's for all the districts in 9/16. And then finally, there was a video, we saw a preview video on children's mental health. It's a locally produced documentary-style training film about children's mental health and trauma. And we've seen some of these things about ACEs, Paper Tigers. I don't know if anybody saw that movie a couple years back, but they have this whole study guide and all these things that you can do to discuss and go as deep as you want into it. So I have the information on that too. If anybody's interested, you can download it online, and I have a password for you if you'd like to take a look at it. So that was 9/16. The end.
I'll go next. So also a week ago, I attended the first meeting this year of the Equity Alliance Minnesota, formerly EMID board. My first attendance as the actual board member. It was an organizational meeting, so largely it was, naming the official paper and all that kind of stuff. They did have the report from their auditor, which was positive. There were a couple areas of slight concern in the previous audit that were addressed, so that's always a positive thing. They ended up, I think, with about a $2.4 million fund balance for the year, so it's kind of steady state where it's been, I think, for a few years. If you're interested, it's online. I have hard copies if anybody wants. I can give it to you if you want to look at the audit, but I think I came away, confirming my thinking that it was a fairly well-run organization, and they're very responsible and are good stewards of the funds that we pay them, either for work or as a member of the group. They elected the chair, the clerk, the treasurer. I'm none of those there, thank God. Although I did end up getting named to the policy committee and the personnel committee, so we'll see what that ends up being. let's see. They did have also a report from Chris Amundsen, who's their lobbyist, on anything with the legislature that she felt might be coming specifically regarding equity within Minnesota. And the report was kind of a bleak one, that with so many things going on right now, that she, in her opinion, the legislature is not really going to get into or tackle anything specific to that this year, that if anything, it's going to be more focused on other issues, even beyond education, especially with the new tax law. And there's a lot of interest in doing that, and that could, of course, have a secondary impact on school funding and what's out there, but that's really where they're at. So she did she disabused us of any notions of hope that the legislature might run out there and just do great things regarding equity to be of particular importance to the EMIT organization. So that's that. I also had a chance with others here to attend the most recent quarterly local government meeting, which this most recent time was held at Falcon Heights, that Aldo invites local folks to. One story that would interest you, especially with something you said earlier tonight, which is cute, but it's not too much time. Both Mary Jo McGuire and Hausman were there, right? The representative and the county commissioner. And one of them, I can't remember which whole story, that the two of them together, and I think with a third legislator or something that happened to be female, were doing a school visit. And we're talking about what they did at the state level, at the county level, how it all works, all that to a group of elementary school kids, like second or third grade. And they were all done, and they said a little boy raised his hand and said, "Can a boy do these jobs too?" So it's all about context and expectation. So there you go. But I was quite impressed with Falcon Heights and Beth Benke, right, the principal, and who I feel is certainly representative of the quality of principals we have throughout the district. But I'll highlight her tonight just because I was there and it was most recent. But on the tour, just seeing the level of one-on-one, first-name basis interaction she had with almost every kid that she ran into, the number of students who just ran up to her and hugged her, the one little girl who had a new necklace that she just wanted to make sure that Beth saw. Oh, look, I got a necklace. So the culture there of really being involved with and personally engaged with the kids, it's imbued through the whole school. You can see it in the teachers, and I believe culture is kind of top down. So I think, again, it's a testament at Falcon Heights to Beth and her leadership and the kind of attitude and approach that they take there. So this was a very enjoyable experience as we did the walkthrough afterward. I know not everybody could stay. I think Kate and I were the two that were able to stay for the walkthrough. But I was quite impressed with Beth and just the level of involvement she had with the kids and the staff as we walked through.
And those Larson girls are pretty awesome too.
Well, there you go. There you go. I think the last thing is, I know Todd and I had talked about this briefly. I am going to attend. Are you going to go to the MSBA officers workshop that's being offered? I think I'm going to the one in March. So as new officers, just to lend you guys the confidence that whatever we think we know about being a clerk and or a treasurer, we'll realize there's a lot probably that we don't know yet. Hopefully they'll help us on that in the next month or so. That's it.
I had a conflict, so I couldn't go to the DCAC meeting, so I had Mike cover for me. And then that DCAC meeting also conflicted with the Edgerton PTA meeting, so I couldn't go to that either, but that was all last night.
So
It was all canceled, nothing happened, even my conflict didn't happen. So we just sat in front of the fire. That's my big report.
That's a good report. That's good. Yeah. Okay, if I go next. I had the opportunity, and I was really excited to do this. I think most of us were all aware, and I saw Director Goggins and Director Johnson there. But the grand opening of the Rams Idea Lab, it was exciting to see. I think what's going to be further developed over time, but 3D printers, I think a vinyl cutter, and I'm really excited to see how the Rams staff and students, how they're going to be, kind of incorporating this into their curriculum, classes. So I'm really excited that we'll probably get a report on that. And just kind of a caveat, kind of going back to that local government officials meeting. The next meeting in April is going to be, I think, a tour of the Rams Idea Lab. We're going to meet at the middle school and then have a tour of the Idea Lab. So something to look forward to. And then just a real quick, since we've kind of discussed the legislature, AMSD, their annual legislative preview is next Friday. That's February 2nd at the Ties Building. Breakfast at 7:30, program at 8 o'clock. It's usually very well attended. Area legislators are going to be there. There's a pretty good legislative panel. Some of the representatives in Senate who are on the various House and Senate education committees and financing committees are going to be there. So I know I'll be there for sure, being the rep, but come if you can. So that's it.
Okay. Again, the Rams Idea Lab is really outstanding. If you're at the middle school, you have a lot to look forward to. Took an opportunity in the last couple of weeks to visit Little Canada, Edgerton, and Rams. So took some tours there, and the principals are outstanding. My children went through Emmett Williams, who also is an outstanding principal, but I had not had the opportunity to visit these other schools. So thank you for giving me their time. So it was awesome. I'd also like to just congratulate finally, I'd like to congratulate the Roseville Area Middle School and Roseville Area High School competitive cheer teams who won first place at the Blue Jackets Cheer Roundup last Saturday. They're preparing for state at the Roy Wilkins Auditorium on Saturday. So if you have nothing to do, you can go down and spend the entire day doing cheer. So, which my daughter's in cheer, so that's where I'll be. That's all I have.
Okay. I think basically everything I had on my list has been covered. The one thing I will mention is the MSDBA presentation that I mentioned with two exceptional staff that we have, Amy Dowland and Jennifer George, went very well. I learned a lot, which is always my trick in doing these things, is I get to see a little more hands-on what is being done and some of the excellent work that our district does. But just to briefly comment, our college and credit classes at the high school increased participation of students of color by 260% and overall by 200%, and 52% of our graduates from the alternative high school have some college credit, which I think those pieces together are amazing. And as we increase those students at the high school, our AP score, our average AP score, has not gone down. So increased number of students, and they're equally successful. Now, we still do have a gap between the different groups, but we're maintaining the success level while we're increasing participation. So it's amazing to hear the work that's being done directly with our students. It's really exciting. And that concludes the board report. So next is the superintendent's report.
Well, at his second meeting as a school board director, welcome Director Johnson, and thank you for leading in this capacity, important capacity. And I was fortunate enough to attend the presentation that Chair Goggins and Amy Deline and Jennifer George gave, and it was really impressive. And I even learned a couple things that I didn't know, so that was good to hear. Very well done. I know that Sherry Thompson gave a facilities planning update, but I just want to touch on that briefly because it is so important. And again, thanking our community for supporting us through the bond referendum and getting improvements to our facilities that will greatly benefit students. So we are working, of course, with KFI as the engineering firm that we've contracted with Kraus Anderson as a construction management firm, and with LSE as the architectural firm. And they all report to us. And although you could drive by our schools and not see any construction yet, there's been a lot of planning that's been going on, a lot of meetings, and trying to think of how we stage this, how do we make the taxpayer dollars go further. Also, I do want to point out, this has been pointed out in the past school board meetings, that when we sold the recent long-term facilities bond, bonds and then the bonds, general obligation bonds from the referendum, we got lower interest rates than we had anticipated, which means a smaller increase to the tax bill for taxpayers in our district than we had anticipated. So that's good news. But a lot of this is looking at how do you coordinate it, not open up areas as often so that you can do more, and how to stage it. So a lot of that hasn't been determined yet, but as was pointed out by Ms. Thompson earlier, the bond portion of the work, which is 3 to 4 years, and won't start till at least next fall, which is earlier than we had first anticipated. That's 3 to 4 years, and I think we can say with reasonable confidence now that work will start at Roseville Area High School and Little Canada Elementary at least, and the start of that process, because those are the two schools that have the biggest capacity needs, the most urgent capacity needs that we need to get to as soon as possible. But I also want to remind the community that the long-term facilities, the increased work in that area is a plan for about 10 years. And so that's going to be a longer-term thing, and we're not sure what sites will have what done when yet. That's all part of the equation here, but I'm glad to say we're making progress and look forward to the site committees that were referenced earlier and the community meetings and those sorts of things. I think it'll really be a good process that will end up with a lot of good things for students and staff. So thank you. That's it.
Okay. The next item we have is we will be going into a closed session for discussion of labor negotiations. The open meeting law, Minnesota statute, section 13D.03, subdivision 1, states that a closed meeting may be held to consider strategy for labor negotiations, including negotiation strategies or development or discussions, and review of labor negotiation proposals. Accordingly, I hereby entertain a motion that this meeting will be closed for the purpose of discussing labor negotiation strategy. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, I adjourn the regular meeting, and we will have a 5-minute break and begin the closed session.